This is the final addition to my arc power rankings trilogy. In those previous videos, I went through every major arc and ranked the top 10 characters based only on what we knew up to that point in the story. So for example, when ranking Itachi in part 1, I didn't rank him until he appeared in the Sannin Showdown arc, and I didn't take something like Susanoo into account because we didn't see that until part 2. These videos are a peek back into our perspectives earlier in the series, and allows us to sort of re-experience Naruto again. And just as a reminder, these lists are very general rankings since I'm covering such a broad topic, so just keep in mind I'm working with very limited information here, so there will be a lot of gray areas. Another reminder is that I'll only be ranking characters I deem significant. In the Land of Waves arc, for example, I didn't rank the other 4 Kage because I didn't seem that important, and it was more fun just to rank the characters that we actually knew something about. There will likely be other technicalities as well, but we'll get there when we get there. For those that have not seen part 1 or part 2 in the series, it is imperative that y'all watch this before this video, and the links to those videos will be in the description. Once again, I have to give thanks to Thunder God for making these fantastic graphics for this video. Although this is the last video of the ARC Power Rankings, this doesn't mean that this has to be my last Power Rankings video. If you like this style, I would suggest liking this video so I'll know if y'all actually want to see other Power Ranking video ideas I have. It does really help me understand how much y'all enjoy a video. Lastly, just as a refresher, this is a reminder for where we left off the last Power Rankings. The Kage Summon is a very special arc, and that we see a lot of new conflicts begin to be fleshed out from the conclusions of the old ones. Now that the Akatsuki has wreaked enough havoc, they've brought the shinobi world on the brink of a world war. We also get to see more of what Sasuke is like post Itachi's death, and this is important because Itachi defined what his character did for the entire series. We also get to find out more information about the masked man claiming to be Madara, and blatantly states his motives in front of the 5 Kage. As for Naruto, immediately after things are solved for him domestically, he has to deal with international issues. The entire shinobi world is now vowed to protect him, but now at the same time, Sasuke has put an international target on his back as well. Couple this with being a major world-building event, and we get quite a change-up from early part 2. I just want to focus on what the 5 Kage brought to our attention since they did most of the world-building. There's nothing new going on with the sand, but as for the cloud, we mostly learn about the Red Kage. He's a physical force we haven't seen since Tsunade's introduction. Sasuke's Chidori couldn't even pierce him hardly from a direct hit. He's even so physically strong and fast that Sasuke has to resort to using flame control to protect himself. A does seem to back off once Sasuke activates his Susanoo though, so it makes me wonder what his limits really are. His bodyguard C says his reaction time is on par with Minato, so that could mean that the Red Kage is a lot stronger than we saw, or Minato is a lot weaker than we thought. Sasuke could react to him with his jutsu but not his body, so A might be the fastest character in the series right now. We just need a little bit more information about him to make sure. As for the Stone Village, Onuki has some really interesting jutsus. For starters, he can fly, but he also seems to have the ability to disintegrate people. That could be incredibly overpowered, but we only see him use it on Sasuke, who is on the verge of passing out. I also wonder if this will be a Hiruzen case where he's far out of his prime as well, but the main thing I want to see is the extent of his particle style. The Mist Village also gives us some interesting information as well. We learn that the previous Mizukage could control their own tailed beast inside of them, and Mei says that someone in the Akatsuki might have been controlling them. There's definitely some lore that needs to be further explored there, but as for Mei, she also shows some cool new jutsus. She can use both acid and lava at the same time for a very potent offense. That acid, in fact, was strong enough to melt the Susanoo some, so it shows a lot of potential because of that. Like the other Kage, I just want to see more of what she's capable of, really. Lastly, we learn about Danzo finally, and he shows off what a wind style user can really be. It's really the first time we've seen a Kage-level fighter use it, and it was very entertaining. He unfortunately was going against someone a tier above him, so it didn't appear as effective as it probably was. His Izanagi ability is pretty lame though, and I hope this is a one-time occurrence. None of these Kage ended up making the top 10 though. Onuki, Gaara, and Mei didn't show enough of what they're capable of, while Danzo doesn't seem quite good enough to make the cut. He barely lost against Sasuke, but he had an incredibly favorable matchup since Sasuke's low endurance is not good against Izanagi. I think there are some arguments for him being at 10, but as for me, I'll give him an honorable mention. He certainly does have the strongest wind style though, since his wind style could majorly damage Sasuke's Susanoo after all. The bodyguards play a lesser role, but we also see some new things from them too. We see Darui use something called Gale Style, which seems to be like a completely new Kekkei Genkai that looks like plasma or something. Kankuro is also using Sasori as a puppet, which is pretty neat. We see Chojuro show us a new sword from the 7 Ninja Swordsman, and Ao is like Kakashi but with a Byakugan instead. Danzo's bodyguard shows what an elite Aburame and Yamanaka look like. Fu can mind transfer with no risk of passing out, and Torne can poison you with one touch. This was so potent that the masked man had to sever his arm to avoid dying. I think that's all the characters we need to cover that aren't on the list. I didn't say much about them power-wise because they didn't get the chance to go all out. They more so showed us many new jutsus and the potential that comes with it. I can see any of the Kage potentially cracking the top 10 if they get the chance to show off soon. Danzo is the only one who expanded in power and showing us Kage tier win style, and his Izanagi is easily one of the best defenses in the show so far. Now, as for the changes in the top 10, the top 6 stays the same, but Kisame jumps all the way to 7 and Sasuke ties with Naruto at 8. This means that Hiruzen finally fell off after being on the list for the entirety of the show. So Minato now has a long streak of being on the list. Chunin Exam's Orochimaru is also somehow miraculously still on the list despite peaking so many arcs ago, but I don't expect him to last any longer with these Kage threatening him. There's also the fact of him being dead not letting him progress any further. As for Sasuke, this is the first time back since the Land of Waves arc, but he was an honorable mention since the Tenchi Bridge arc. He surprisingly was not the first Team 7 member to make it back on, but he's here now. Itachi first showed us how powerful the Mangekyo could be, and now Sasuke is really showing us how powerful it is. He first 1v1s the Raikage, and then after powering up has both Gaara and A at a loss for what even to do against him. Even while using the Susanoo in its weakest form and while gassed, he briefly held his own against another 2 Kage. He had to be saved, but that was still an impressive gauntlet he ran. Then when we see him fight Danzo, he shows his max Mangekyo potential. His Amaterasu and even his Susanoo hands were attacks that Kage couldn't even attempt to evade. Usually such overpowered arsenals are used by dumber characters, but not this time around. This allows for Sasuke to get the most out of his arsenal and become an actual matchup nightmare. We don't know the strength of the 5 Kage as of right now, but Sasuke is currently just a tier above them. Excluding Itachi, this is the most explosive character we've seen so far, and going forward he will get the Eternal Mangekyo, which will prevent him from going blind. So the risk for these jutsus will drastically shrink. Once he recovers, it'll be interesting to see what happens if he goes to Konoha. He'll be such a force of nature like pain that Naruto will likely have to take him on alone. We are about due for another Naruto vs Sasuke battle by now. As for Naruto, the reason why he's tied with Sasuke is because I can't quite differentiate which one is stronger right now. Zetsu says Naruto is, but that's at the beginning of the arc when Sasuke is way weaker. We see Naruto take on 5 passive pain with Intel and Toad summons, but then we see Sasuke run a Kage gauntlet before outclassing Danzo. And then they have a scuffle at the end of the arc where we don't see anything that separates one from the other. I had to tie them because they just show that they are above that Sani level, but they show it in such different ways that it's hard to compare. Anyways, I did decide to put Kisame above them because of how well he did against B. Sasuke at least had to exert himself against Danzo, but Kisame beat B with negative difficulty. We finally see what he's made of, and it does not disappoint. His ability to eat chakra to amplify his own chakra is ridiculously overpowered. He zaps one of the biggest chakra pools in the series right quickly, so what could he do against a more normal chakra pool? On top of that, he has practically no weaknesses since he can create a giant water dome and absorb Samihara in himself to protect it. Most characters in that situation are not going to win because they can't escape the water or even be that effective in Kisame's domain. While B was the perfect matchup for him, he still shows that he is also a matchup nightmare just like Sasuke. And now that he's infiltrated the Cloud Village, it makes me want to see what he's capable of when he's not facing such a favorable matchup. As I said earlier, the top 6 remains unchanged for now, but we do learn why the Sage of the Six Paths is referred to as God. Toby can't be fully trusted, but he does say that the Sage fought the combination of all tailed beasts as the 10 tails in one, and after that he became its host, which apparently gives you unfathomable amounts of power. Toby wants to become the 10 tails host and then put everyone under Genjutsu, so that could be how he's planning to fight everyone. We can't tell for certain if Toby is really Madara or not, so for now I'm just placing them in the same place. Sasuke and Naruto have finally begun to reach the upper echelons of the shinobi world, and it makes me wonder if they'll end up fighting for that number 1 spot eventually. Things look grim for Kakashi and Sakura re-entering the top 10 though, as there's so many other people making a run for the list right now. Going forward in the plot, I'm interested in to see how Toby will deal with fighting the 5 great nations at the same time. When he said war, I'm not sure if he's actually going to directly engage them since he's down to 2 Akatsuki members at this point. Speaking of Toby, he firmly proved how powerful his intangibility is. I mean, he could stand in front of the 5 Kage and they couldn't do a single thing. Even Kakashi's Kamui didn't work against him. I honestly don't know how anyone could ever defeat him because as of now, it looks like he can turn intangible as much as he wants. Another interesting development is what is going on with Kabuto. He's using snakes now and looks very Orochimaru-like too. And he has some type of plan which could honestly be anything. I would bet on it being some type of revenge against Sasuke, or he's going to attack Konoha for Orochimaru or something. Kabuto's emergence is the last scene in this arc, so it's time to recap. This arc didn't add too much power-wise, but it showed us many new characters and many new jutsus. The top 6 remains in their own tiers above everyone else for the 3rd arc in a row, but there's a lot of potential being created, and I expect for that to be actualized in this upcoming war. This arc cleanly sets up the rest of the series. The next arc we have is the Countdown arc, and this arc answers a lot of the questions presented in the Kage Summit. We learn what Kabuto's motives are on the surface, and we learn that Toby is planning on using an army of white Zetsu to deal with the colossal enemy he's created. Overall, this feels more like an interlude arc that sets up the war, but this doesn't mean nothing significant power-wise is going on. In fact, the formerly immovable top 6 has been shook up, and the bottom of the list has also changed some too. Before I get to the new list though, I'll have to talk about the new developments occurring and the new honorable mentions as well. For starters, Conan makes a surprise appearance during this arc, and even pushes the boundaries of power in Naruto. Of course, I'm referring to our massive paper bomb for Toby, which is easily the biggest explosion we've seen in the series so far. I can't take this into a consideration for the list though, as this was a special planned out event that was years in the making. She was still so impressive though, as she could react to Toby at times, and even damage him so badly she took his arm off. It makes me wonder where she fits into the Akatsuki rankings, but that's not the point of this video, so I'll just leave that be. Another interesting fight is at the end of the arc when Kabuto and Deidara go to Turtle Island. Onoki teases us again with particle style when his bodyguard prevents him from presumably damaging the turtle with his attack. This moment suggests that his ability can be used on a large scale, which gives Onoki the potential to be the first active Kage to make the top 10 since Tsunade in the Akatsuki suppression arc. Other things to note during this fight is that Deidara and Kabuto were able to team up to flip Turtle Island 180 degrees. I think that moment in particular shows that power in general is really beginning to ramp up, and even the smaller fights are blowing some of the previous bigger fights out of the water power-wise. I would expect for this to continue when we see all the fighting going on during the actual war. That's about all I have to say about the characters that aren't on the list, so I'll go ahead and start naming the list now. At number 10 I have Naruto, even though he could be much higher. Now that he's harnessed the power of the Nine Tails, the sky's the limit for him, but we just haven't seen him do anything yet. We do know that the power-up was so great that he couldn't comprehend how fast he hit Kisame, so I do expect him to shoot up the list once he actually starts fighting some. I just can't quantify how much stronger he's gotten, so I'm keeping him closer to his Seizumi power level as of now. This means that Sasuke has been bumped off after finally getting back on because during this arc he's just been blind. His Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan power-up is going to need to be huge to make it back on a list, with how fast everything else is progressing right now. I'm sure Kishimoto will find a way to make this happen, but as of right now I'm not sure how his new eyes will make him that much more powerful. Orochimaru also has finally been bumped off, which ends his streak of 10 arcs of being in the top 10. Which was coincidentally just as long as Hiruzen's. Minato now has the longest streak at 11, and he and Naruto are the only ones who were still on from the Land of Waves arc. Anyways, at number 9 I have Kisame, and at number 8 I have Guy. Even though Guy has a good matchup against Kisame, his final attack still overpowered Kisame's final attack, regardless of the matchup. We finally see the Gates makes its first appearance since the Kazekage retrieval arc, and it is continuing to live up to the hype. The scale of this attack also pushes the boundaries of power in Naruto, specifically in just raw physical power. Even though the 7th gate is an all-or-nothing move, there are few people I could see surviving it right now. As for Kisame, he did show a new jutsu called Super Water Shark Bomb that could absorb other attacks. That shows near limitless amounts of potential, but due to his death, we'll never see it actualize. It's most likely the strongest water-style jutsu in the series, though. Next to number 7 is Itachi, and at number 6 is Pain. But at number 5, we see a surprising drop for Toby. Of course, he does add the Rinnegan at the end of the arc, but we don't know how powerful he'll become because of it. As for him with just a Sharingan, he looked far less invulnerable in this arc. Minato and Kabuto both embarrassed him, but even Conan was able to greatly damage him with just a normal attack. He did, however, show that he can Izanagi like Danzo, and this makes his survivability that much more overpowered. I expect him to move up at least a little once we see him with the Rinnegan, but as for now I can't take that into account since he hasn't showed his proficiency with it. Next at number 4 I have Minato, who we finally got to see fight a real opponent. It's been a crime that he's been on the list for the entire series and we didn't see him fight until now. He does live up to his hype though, as he somehow fought both Toby and the Nine Tails and still had the choice to self-sacrifice or not. We learn that he's proficient with sealings, such as when he seals both halves of the Nine Tails with 2 different sealing methods. We see his Rasengan's are potent enough to one-shot Toby, and his Flying Raijin is even more powerful than Toby's intangibility as well. He can even do things like teleport-tailed beast bombs, and overall he's just a very complete fighter. He's also the only person that has figured out Toby's ability within one interaction, which highlights how smart he is as well. After slipping from 1 to 6, he's made it back to 4, which might give him the chance to be on the list for the entire series despite being dead for its entirety. Overall, his flashback greatly pushed the extent of speed in Naruto along with intelligence as well. Next, number 3, I have Kabuto of all people, shockingly. The last time he was on the list was for the tuning exams, but I never imagined he would make it back to 3 as a possible God of Shinobi tier level character. He's been productive while he's been inactive, and now has an army of Edo Tensei fighters. He's also built off of what Orochimaru started, considering that he told Deidara that his reanimation jutsu was not going to be holding him back. And he has people like Nagato and Itachi in his arsenal. He essentially has his own personal platoon of fighters that could only be stopped by being sealed or immobilized. And it includes some of the people that are already in the top 10, along with several previous Kage. Another thing to consider is that he has some type of trump card that forces Toby to join forces with him, so we actually don't know the full extent of his power right now. We also don't know how powerful he is by himself either. Kabuto's Edo Tensei definitely has potential to shake up the list, due to all the Kages he has, and even possibly show us what Nagato looks like without the 6 pass of pain. Next at number 2 I have Hashirama, and at number 1 I have the Sage of the 6 pass. Hashirama's relationship to Toby is beginning to get weaker and weaker as it seems less and less likely that Toby is Madara. I still don't want to split up Toby and Madara though, because it makes the list more interesting and they'd be in the same tier anyway. It's about time to see what Hashirama is really made of though, because he's only up here right now because he beat Madara and is referred to as a god of shinobi. But anyway, this arc not only shook up the list greatly, but it also has set several things in motion that could continue that trend. I already mentioned some of the ways certain aspects of power were pushed in this arc, like Minato with speed, but overall this arc shows that the average character is getting a lot stronger. More or less, all the characters that fought in this arc were Kage level, and this is a trend that has been continuing for a long time. We'll likely see a lot of different fights in this war, and most likely the fighters will be Kage level, and we might even see some of the top tier finally fight regularly as well. The next arc is the Confrontation arc, and there's a lot to talk about due to the plethora of fights we see in a rapid succession. I'll first start off by talking about some of the characters that didn't make the list since there is not much going on there. Just like I had wished in the Kage Summit arc, we are seeing some of the Kage fight now, and I'll first talk about Gaara. He's a bit fortunate to be in the perfect setting for his fights, but he still does really well regardless. He beats his dad one-on-one and then proceeds to be the main fighter who takes on Gengetsu. While Gengetsu does have a very bad matchup against Gaara, it's still impressive that he's able to hold his own against such a formidable foe. We also see him show some of the largest jutsu in the series when he tries to flood the 4 reanimated Kage with sand, and this is certainly the biggest Earth-style jutsu we have seen so far at the least. Competition for the list has gotten stiff though, so I don't feel like he's quite at that level right now. The Gold and Silver brothers are also 2 characters that have made their way into honorable mention territory. I don't feel comfortable putting them on that list though because their performance was so inconsistent. One of them gets beat by Darui, and then the other loses to Team 10. But then at the same time, we see Kinkaku solo the entire army on the beachfront, so bad that they had to call in reinforcements. I feel like these two needed to be written out quickly, so they just got cheesed hard as a result. They still show off some of the best hacks in the series with their ninja tools, and some of the greatest raw power considering that one of them destroyed an army by himself. We see some other inconsistencies too, like when Deidara and Sasori lose to Kankuro and Sai, and it seems like the result of the plot needing to move fast. Hanzo is another character with a disappointing performance, considering he lost to a samurai of all people. That fight did seem to be the result of him losing his conviction, but it is still disappointing to see the alleged Sannin defeater to go out like that. It's revealed that Pain killed him though, so the likelihood of him actually defeating the Sannin seems pretty low now. He must have started fighting them when they were gassed, or they were far weaker than we had previously thought during that war. Now, a reanimation who did not disappoint would be the 3rd Raikage. He stretches to the limit of durability and endurance mainly. We learned that he fought 10,000 shinobi for 3 days and 3 nights, apparently, which is unheard levels of endurance. We also see him survive a Rasen Shuriken, which is a feat that might even surpass Kisame surviving Hirador without dying. His lightning armor was so strong that his own attack had to be used against him to defeat him. However, he doesn't make the list either because he does end up losing to Naruto. Naruto gets a little bit of help along the way, but the fact that he isn't touched once does not help the Raikage's case for being on the list. I think that's about it for those that didn't make the list, so now I can start with number 10. At number 10 I actually have Gengetsu. A big part of this is because he killed Mu, and also died in the process of this. Outside of that though, he holds his own for a very long time despite Gaara countering everything he did. His clan mirage was strong enough to affect both Gaara and Onoki, along with the army that surrounded him, and even after the clan was destroyed, his Steam Imp once again could only be stopped by Gaara. He's definitely the best mask Genjutsu user we've seen, and because of his win against Mu, I do believe he stands out from all the other honorable mentions. Next to number 9 I have Mu and Onoki tied. On the graphic it'll just show Onoki for simplicity's sake. The hype for Onoki's particle style is still being teased, but we do at least know that it's for real. We see their clashes carve large masses of the landscape, and Mu himself even says that particle style could take out an army of shinobi. There's no blocking the attacks, so that allows for both these characters to have a really high power ceiling. They do both differ in some ways though, as Onoki can do things like make Mu so heavy that he can't move, but Mu can turn invisible, both visually and as sensory types. We see them stalemate, so that's why I tied them, but the main reason they're above Gengetsu is that Mu is the last of the 4 Kage standing. Overall, these two show some of the strongest hacks that rival other hacks like Amaterasu, Flying Raijin, and Tobi's intangibility. Like I said earlier, this is the first time an acting Kage has made the list since Tsunade and the Akatsuki suppression arc. Next, number 8, I have Naruto, who actually comes off as a little disappointing. I was expecting to be a little stronger after controlling the Nine Tails, but I suppose he still has room to grow. At first, he starts strong by showing he was faster than Raikage, but when he fights Nagato, he doesn't do well. For the second half of the fight, Itachi has to carry him, such as when Itachi saves Naruto from certain death, and then ends up defeating Nagato as well. After that, he starts doing better, and is able to force Mu to split with a little help from Gaara. He also defeats the Raikage, like I said earlier. In terms of the boundaries he pushes, he is by far the best sensor in the series, since he seems to be able to sense everyone everywhere, and even sense the Zetsus that the rest of the Shinobi Alliance could not. His chakra pool for a human is by far the most we've seen so far, since the Shadow Clones alone are carrying the war effort at almost every front. His speed is also beginning to rival Minato, since he outdid both Raikage in both Sage Mode and in KCM. It's still up to debate if he's faster than Minato yet, but in terms of lateral speed, he most likely is. Next to number 7, I have Itachi, who's ahead of Naruto because of how much better he did against Nagato. There are 2 moments where Itachi blitzes Nagato from cover, with one of them resulting in Nagato's defeat. It just shows us how strong alive Itachi would be without illness and without Mangekyo side effects. There's not much else to say about him because he doesn't show anything new except for Kojo Matsukami. It strangely was able to override Itachi's Mangekyo and Kabuto's summoning contract at the same time. That alone makes it the strongest genjutsu in the series so far, but then again Itachi says it would take 10 years to activate again. It makes me wonder if that was also the case for Shisui. Next number 6, I have Nagato. I got rid of Pain just to make the list more simple, and we know Nagato is stronger since Naruto said so himself. He's above Itachi because Itachi had to rely heavily on B and Naruto to destroy planetary devastation. Had they not been there, Itachi likely doesn't destroy it. Even beyond that, once we see him regain his mobility, he defeats both Naruto and B at the same time before Itachi has to save them. He also shows that he can use planetary devastation without breaking a sweat, which means his chakra reserves are likely far greater than what Pain's was. Defeating both B and KCM Naruto at the same time speaks volumes itself. The top 5 ended up remaining in the same position, but there are some new developments going on here. Tobi does have the Rinnegan now, but we haven't really seen him fight, so I'm still mainly ranking One-Eye Tobi. We did see him use the Geto statue to have his way with one of the Alliance divisions. It is also likely that he's stronger than Minato now that he has the Rinnegan, but I'm still waiting for him to start fighting to definitively say that. The sheer power of the Geto statue would not be effective against Minato, since he can just teleport away, and I'm still waiting for Tobi to show that he can take Minato in a one-on-one setting. As for Minato, we get another crazy flashback about him where he scares the 4th Raikage with just a kunai. Just as a reminder, Sasuke Shidori barely pierced the same armor, and KCM Naruto's Rasen Shuriken couldn't fully damage the 3rd's armor either. It's still amazing how he's been dead the entire series and still sitting at number 4. I still have Minato above Tobi because Tobi hasn't shown off the Rinnegan in battle yet, but most likely Tobi will surpass him once he starts fighting Naruto. Lastly, Kabuto doesn't have any direct developments for him, but his Edo Tensei army does confirm how strong we thought they were in the last arc. He's about to play his trump card too, so we might even see him displace Hashirama. Going forward, all the smaller fights seem to be resulting in major showdowns we're going to see in the war. Kabuto just used his trump card against the 2 of the Kage and their army, and Naruto and B are on a collision course with Tobi and his Jinchuriki. Itachi is also heading to Kabuto to stop Edo Tensei, which likely means that we're going to see what Kabuto is capable of without his reanimations. Sasuke is nowhere to be seen in this arc, and this seems to be a trend in part 2. Who knows if he'll even be in the next arc. It's become clear in this arc power keeps trending up faster and faster. The next arc will likely push the boundaries of power even further, since it seems like the main showdowns are now coming up. Anything feels possible in the next arc, and this also makes me feel like the next list will be shaken up quite a bit. The next arc is the Climax arc, and this is the long, convoluted arc that violently shook up the list. Most of the people that did the fighting in this arc are on the list, so there's not much to say for honorable mentions. Onoki did drop out of the top 10 after putting up an insane performance against Madara though. As for the power levels, they are still generally rising faster and faster. We're seeing the power of an army fight off something like the Ten Tails, for example. The main fights in this arc are way more stacked than in the past. You have Madara dropping meteors, and then we see the 5 Kage take them on together. Kabuto fights Sasuke and Itachi, and we see several tailed beasts try to fight Naruto's half of the Nine Tails at once. The last Jonin level fighter we saw in a significant fight is probably all the way back to Kakashi vs. Pain by now. And then at the end of the arc, we find out Obito turned into the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. Who even knows how powerful he's going to be now? We even see Hashirama and Madara show us how gods of shinobi fight, and it easily dwarfs all the power we've seen beforehand combined. As for the list though, we start out with Nagato at 10, but there's nothing new to report about him. He stayed on the list for 6 arcs in a row now, but the competition ahead of him is so insane now that his streak looks like it's coming to an end. Next at number 9 I have Minato, who we're finally going to see do something in the present. He hasn't done anything yet, as all he's done is hold down the barrier for the Ten Tails. However, he does have KCM mode now, which could shoot him a few more spots up the list if he has the exact same power-up that Naruto has. His speed should already be unfathomable at this point, but the main thing that could bump him up is if he can get a Kurama avatar like Naruto. If he gets that, I think he has a good shot of staying on the list for the entirety of the series, honestly. Next to number 8 I have Sasuke, who seems to be possibly progressing at a fast pace too. At first, we see him fight Kabuto with Itachi, and Itachi does a lot better than him in that fight, and his Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan is a little disappointing because all it does is seem to give him his normal stamina back. Going forward, though, we learned that Madara with EMS could wrap a Susanoo around a Genjutsu Nine Tails, so you could say Sasuke hasn't fully actualized his power yet. This is supported by the fact that he starts doing better when he reaches the main front of the war. He's able to keep pace with Naruto and combine jutsus with him after perfectly matching Naruto's chakra output. His Amaterasu is heavily inferred to have been able to burn the Ten Tails to death, so the scale and strength to his jutsu also seems to be increasing. He's likely on the list to stay going forward. Next to number 7 I have Naruto, who showed us what the real power of the Nine Tails under control looks like. As soon as Kurama gave in, Naruto was able to defeat 6 tailed beasts at once with little difficulty. Unfortunately, Obito's arsenal will force Naruto to stop using his chakra avatar, so we don't know exactly how strong he is right now. He's above Sasuke right now because Sasuke hasn't shown that much power in his arsenal yet, but more than likely Sasuke will catch him once he's reached his potential. Naruto's sitting pretty comfortably here though, because no one below him has showed anything remotely as impressive. Characters like Itachi, Sasuke, and Onoki have the potential to do something similar, but Naruto still has so many other things going on for him that it carries him to a spot as well. He held his own decently against Obito at times, and that was even without the Kurama avatar. Next is number 6, I have Obito before he is the Ten Tails host. There's some things I had to subtract from him because his greatest strengths were situational. I don't know if I've said it explicitly yet, but these rankings have been based on what you could bring to a fight on any given day. For example, for Conan, I didn't consider her paper bomb trap because they was specifically for fighting Obito. This means I can't consider Obito controlling the Ten Tails because that was a situational moment where he was doing it just so he could launch the Infinite Tsukuyomi. This means that the Jinchuriki he controlled also can't be considered because it was Kabuto's Edo Tensei, enabling him to control him. Even after those subtractions though, he's plenty worthy of being number 6. There were several times where Naruto had to be bailed out against his allies, and I think that proves that he's still ahead of Naruto right now. He also doesn't have to solely rely on intangibility anymore since he can summon the Geto statue now. As for the Rinnegan, he says he doesn't use it because Naruto knows how to counter it, so I can't really consider that either. Next to number 5 I have Orochimaru of all people. After he comes back to life, he shows immediately that he can just summon Minato, Tobirama, and Hiruzen. I'm not counting Hashirama here because Orochimaru already said that he can't control him. I put Orochimaru over Obito now because I do think that these 4 could probably take down Obito. Minato has KCM mode now, and his teleportation can work like Kakashi's combo in the original fight. Minato would be able to constantly bother Obito along with the other 3 giving him aid. They might not win, but I don't see Obito making progress due to Minato's teleportation. There's a lot of gray area here though, as we don't know how Minato and Obito would stack up in a rematch now. I still do feel like this team is more complete overall when compared to Obito, and they would have a good shot at winning considering a weaker team of Kakashi, Naruto, Guy, and B had the upper hand on Obito before Madara arrived. It's convoluted, but I do think it makes sense in the end. Next to number 4 I have Kabuto. I'm not counting Madara as one of his Edo Tensei because Madara knew the signs to undo the contract, so Kabuto wasn't really in control of him. This is specifically Kabuto at the start of the war with all his Edo Tensei not sealed, so he's still at a level of power that threatens the entire world. Even by himself, we see he could hold his own against Itachi and Sasuke, but then again, that was a fight where no one was able to kill each other due to its circumstances. He still shows that he's the best user of Sage Mode so far in the series, and some other crazy hacks too. Minus his Edo Tensei, he might still make the list, but with people like Itachi, Nagato, Mu, etc. under his control, he's easily above Obito in my opinion. Next to number 3, we take a big leap into the God of Shinobi tier starting with Madara. Of course, Madara and Hashirama's godly powers have been hyped up for a while now, but Madara shows them off first against the Shinobi Alliance and the 5 Kage. The use of God to describe their power was not an exaggeration, as he was able to easily beat both an army and 5 Kage at once with ease. He went easy on the 5 Kage too, and likely could have just beaten them without a perfect Susanoo, with how much he seemed to be messing around. When not messing around, his perfect Susanoo's sword movement alone could clear mountaintops. And this is something we haven't seen a human come even close to doing until now. Next to number 2, I have Hashirama, who is here for 2 reasons. We see him personally restrain the Ten Tails. The Ten Tails never showed the ability to break out of his hold, but the question is could have Hashirama defeated or sealed it? We know the Sage of the Six Paths did, and then it became its host, but Hashirama might have had the potential to do the same. And the reason why Hashirama is above Madara is because we saw him literally restrain the Ten Tails, whereas we saw Madara defeat Army of Shinobi and the 5 Kage. So it is possible, like, we haven't seen Edo Madara fight Edo Hashirama yet, but as of right now, Hashirama has a better feat of just restraining the Ten Tails. We don't know for sure, so for now, the Sage of the Six Paths still safely sits at number 1 yet again. There isn't much to say to recap the arc because it doesn't seem like individual ability categories are really being pushed anymore. This arc was more so dominated by sheer power and certain hacks, really. Going forward after this arc, it looks like we'll see Obito roughly show how powerful the Sage of the Six Paths was now that he's harnessed the Ten Tails. It'll all opposition does against such a force, and also what Madara will do since he didn't want Obito to be the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. The next arc is the Ten Tails arc, and this is an arc where basically only God of Shinobi characters are doing anything of note. This becomes obvious from the beginning when Jubito speed blitzes Hashirama with ease. And then from there, we see a dream team of Tobirama, Minato, Naruto, and Sasuke land many hits on him, but they don't amount to anything because Obito has transcended even above Hashirama and Madara tier of fighters. It takes Sasuke and Naruto reaching that God of Shinobi tier for Obito to be defeated, and it's arguable that Obito only really lost because his conviction wavered. There's not much to say about any of the honorable mentions or any new developments outside the top 10, because that tier of Shinobi has just become almost irrelevant at this point. We do learn more about the Sage of the Six Paths and some of his family, though. When he appears in front of Naruto, we actually learn that he and his brother were the ones to defeat the Ten Tails, so that makes him actually a little weaker than we thought. We also learn of his mother Kaguya, who apparently ruled the world, but her fate or extent of her powers are unknown. We also learned that the Sage had 2 sons who went on to become the strongest around as well, but their fates are unknown as well. I can't really rate Kaguya, Indra, or Ashura because we have no idea how strong they are. It's likely they are at least God of Shinobi level, but exactly placing them on the list is impossible. They also don't seem all that relevant as of now, so I also won't rank them for the sake of making the list more interesting. Anyway, starting at number 10, I have Minato, who's hanging on by a thread. We learn he can in fact make a Kurama avatar like Naruto, however, we don't see him use any tailed beast bombs like Naruto could. He can still use massive Rasengans in that form though. A Kurama avatar with the ability to teleport sounds frightening to say the least, but we've gotten to the point where that's only good enough to make number 10. Next to number 9 I have Orochimaru, who's really just here because he can summon Minato. It is possible though that Minato using the Nine-Tail chakra could break out of Edo Tensei since Hashirama could. However, Hashirama implies that his chakra surpasses at least half the Nine-Tails when Naruto gives his Kyuubi chakra to everyone. So because of that, we don't have solid evidence Minato could break Edo Tensei, so for now Orochimaru is still above Minato. Next to number 8, I have Kabuto, and nothing has changed for this placement. Just remember he can reanimate people like Itachi, Nagato, and Mu. Next to number 7, I have Hashirama, who I have to crown as the strongest overall character who is not on 6 pass level. Keyword is overall. We see him in Edo Madara matchup while Jubito is fighting, and Edo Hashirama defeats Edo Madara despite Madara having the Rinnegan. As I said earlier, he's not close to 6 pass level though. Next to number 6, I have Guy, who showed us that the 8th inner gate transcends God of Shinobi levels of power. Now, while Hashirama is a far more complete fighter than Guy, and is far stronger than 7th gate Guy, I have to put Guy ahead because his 8th gates almost killed Judara. Guy did get help at times though, such as when Minato miraculously teleported between Guy and Madara, and was able to teleport out with the truth-seeking orbs about to hit Guy. And Kakashi also comboed a hole into the truth-seeking orb, encapsulating Madara in that scene. When Guy uses Night Guy though, Madara fails to react to it in time, so that help may not have been all that necessary. And Madara only survives that attack because he has so much chakra at that point he can regenerate half his body near instantly. This makes Guy kind of the imposter among these 6 pass level characters, but he's still worthy of that next tier in my opinion. Next to number 5 I have Jubito, who quickly gets outpaced by the next 3 on this list. not much needs to be said other than that his truth-seeking orbs are the newest ultimate defense in the franchise, and that it did take Naruto and Sasuke teaming up to defeat him. I put him above Guy because if Obito fought Guy, I don't think he would be as eager to fight as Madara. He would just hide in his truth-seeking orbs to stall out Guy, and likely regenerate if Guy hit him through the orb. Again, there's not much to say about this tier of fighters because it's all about just raw power at this point. Next, number 3, I have a tie between Naruto and Sasuke, and then number 2 I have Madara, and then number 1 I have the Sage of the Sixth Pass. The reason why Naruto and Sasuke are individually above Obito now is due to how well they do against Madara, who has a more complete 10 tails inside of him. Naruto hits Madara with a Rasen Shuriken before Sasuke even arrives, but Madara hadn't even fully recovered from Guy's hit yet. Still, their brief fight is weird because Naruto and Sasuke don't work together that much. There are many one-on-one exchanges that Madara lost, and Sasuke was even able to cut Madara in half at one point. Their fight has no conclusion yet because Madara launched the Infinite Dream, so in the next arc we'll probably learn who's who once that fight concludes. Naruto and Sasuke are tied because they both seem to fight evenly and do equally as well against Madara. Madara is still probably ahead though because Naruto and Sasuke did not defeat him. If they coordinate their attacks more going forward, Madara probably won't last. And then the Sage of the Sixth Pass is still number 1 because he says Madara is only approaching him in power. I already kind of recapped the arc in the beginning, but going forward it seems like we only have Naruto, Sasuke, and Madara fighting for that number 2 spot for now. If Madara is defeated, more than likely Sasuke and Naruto will fight, since it has been heavily implied all war that Sasuke is his temporary ally. The next arc is the Kaguya arc, and this is actually the last one in the series. It turns out that the current Indra and Ashura incarnates didn't get to beat the previous Indra incarnate because their mom stepped in. Again, there's not much to say outside the list because we only see like 6 different people fighting this arc. Dual Mangekyo Sharingan Kakashi does not make the list because his power-up was temporary. I've already said the precedent that temporary power-ups don't count, like Conan's Paper Bomb Trap or Obito controlling the Ten Tails. I will say that for a second there, Kakashi's ability to both Kamui and use a perfect Susanoo was uncounterable, but he ran out of chakra quickly. As for the list, all stays the same except Kaguya enters at number 2, and Madara drops down to number 5. Now that we're at the end of the series, I can stop pretending like I'm rewatching it for the first time again, and start explaining my rankings normally. Madara is below Naruto and Sasuke in my opinion because Sasuke gained the same power-up that Madara had. His Susanoo absorbed the chakra of 1 through 8 tails and half the 9 tails, just like Madara absorbed their chakra into his own body. And we see Naruto stalemate him, so that's why Naruto's ahead too. The perfect Susanoo should also be a stronger vessel than Madara's body, so that supports the idea of Sasuke being stronger in that moment. And also, like I said earlier, Madara did not do well against Naruto and Sasuke, and they were barely coordinating their attacks. It really just comes down to them having a more complete arsenal, along with Sasuke and Naruto showing that they can wield the same amount of chakra as Madara too. As for them being tied, I know it'll be controversial. The main reason people put Naruto ahead is because they say he wasn't trying to kill Sasuke, but I think this is conjecture. There have been moments in the series where characters go all out without the intent to kill. When Taka fought B, Suigetsu says they will have to come at B like they're trying to kill him if they want to have any chance of capturing him. There's also no moment in their final fight where Naruto clearly spared Sasuke. When Kaguya fight these two, there were moments where she decided not to kill them. But in their final fight, Naruto never had a moment where he could have just killed Sasuke. We also know that in the Boruto data book that Sasuke is stated to be equal to Naruto in strength, despite Naruto gaining half the 9 tails and Sasuke losing an arm. Now this doesn't directly state that Naruto and Sasuke are equal at the end of Naruto, but it does show that Sasuke is equal in Boruto despite Naruto getting more powerful. Bottom line is that there's no clear evidence that Naruto ever held back against Sasuke, so it's heavy headcanon to say that he did just because he didn't want to kill Sasuke. As for Kaguya too, that's because, like I said, Kaguya had opportunities to kill them, and Naruto and Sasuke only won because they sealed her. The Sage of the Sixth Pass is ahead of Kaguya in his prime when he was the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. He defeated her without the Ten Tails inside of him after all. And since we learned that Kaguya's power comes from the Ten Tails, that clearly makes him stronger. And with that, I seem to finally reach the end of the series. I think the best way to conclude this video is to compare how far different abilities progressed in the series. First, I will say that the winner of the list, I suppose, is Minato, since he made it in every arc except for the last one. There are some people who never left the list after making it on. This includes the Sage of the Sixth Pass, Hashirama, Madara, and Obito. As for Team 7, Naruto made the cut in 8 arcs, Kakashi in 5, Sasuke surprisingly in only 5, and Sakura in only the first arc. I'll go ahead and finish with the comparisons, starting with the nature transformations. Water style was first shown when Kakashi and Zabuza first fought, and we see Kakashi use enough water to style to knock down a few trees in the first arc. In the Countdown arc, we see Kisame uses Water Shark Bomb, and this could absorb other jutsu while also being the size of a tailed beast itself. The first time we see Fire Style damage someone, we see Sasuke blow a hole through a tree when fighting Orochimaru in the Chunin exams. In the Climax arc, we see Madara's Fire Style force dozens of shinobi to douse it with their own water style. The first lightning style we see is Kakashi Shidori when he kills Haku with it in the first arc. In the last arc, we see Sasuke shoot Ender's arrow, and its impact could be felt around the entire world. As for wind style, we see Samara use it in a restricted environment in the Chunin exams. In the last arc, we see Naruto's Rasen Shogun impact also be felt across the entire world. The first earth style we see is Kakashi pulling Sasuke underground in the first arc. In the confrontation arc, we see an entire mountain formed around the Geto statue. The first genjutsu is in the first arc, and it is Kakashi tricking Sakura into thinking that Sasuke is hurt. By the last arc, we see one character put the entire world under an infinite genjutsu. The first dojutsu we see is also from Kakashi in the first arc, and by the last arc, we see Madara's Rinne Sharingan was strong enough to put the whole world under the infinite Tsukiyame. The first idea of a clear defense in the series is Gaara's Sand of the Chunin exams, which was breached by other genin. In the last arcs, we see true seeking orbs which could survive 10-tailed beast bombs and could not be physically touched by any character that was not 6 pass. The first summons we see are Kakashi's dogs, which could hold down a Jonin, and in the Countdown arc, we see Obito summon the Nine Tails, which could level a village if it wanted to. The first Sage Mode we see is in Jiraiya's arc, and it is so primitive that Jiraiya needs several chapters to activate it while binding his hands. In the Climax arc, we see Kabuto is so proficient he can fight with his eyes closed, and his Sage Mode gives him access to several hacks as well. The first space-time ninjutsu we see is Kakashi comboing Deidara's arm, and in the last arc, we see Kage is able to easily teleport others into other dimensions and then just leave them there. There might be some other comparisons I could have made, but these are generally enough to really show how much power increased by the end of the show. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future. Comment something if you have something to say, and thank you for watching, and I guess I'll see y'all next time.